I always thought my parents loved me and my sister equally. You know, that classic American family thing. You raise your kids to believe they're on the same level, that no matter what, you'd be treated fairly. My name is Jessica Miller. I'm 27. And I learned the hard way that sometimes family first actually means family. Except you. It started on a random Tuesday afternoon in March. I'd just come home from work, exhausted from back-to-back meetings at the marketing agency I worked for, when I saw a thick white envelope on my kitchen counter. My apartment was small but mine. I'd bought it after grinding through years of ramen noodles, double shifts, and student loans. Every inch of that place was proof that I could stand on my own 2 feet. The envelope was from my bank. I almost ignored it. Bills, boring stuff, maybe a tax form, but something about the bold letters, urgent, made my stomach flip. I tore it open, skimmed the first page, and felt my knees go weak. This notice is to inform you that your property at 1460 North Harbor has been sold. Final balance, 000. Wait, sold? My apartment? I reread the letter 3 times, as if the words would rearrange themselves into something less insane. But no, my home, my safe place, was gone. Heart pounding, I grabbed my phone and called the bank. After 30 minutes of being bounced around to 3 different reps, one of them finally told me the truth in the calm, detached voice of someone who probably deals with angry customers all day. Yes, Ms. Miller. According to our records, your parents had power of attorney on your property and they executed a sale last month. The funds were transferred into a joint family account. I swear, for a second, the whole world went silent. Power of attorney. That was supposed to be temporary. Years ago, when I was traveling abroad during college, I gave my parents legal authority to handle some paperwork for me. I forgot all about it. I never thought they'd still have that control, let alone use it against me. I hung up, my hands shaking, my chest burning with a rage I'd never felt before. Who does that? Who sells their own daughter's apartment without even telling her? And then it clicked. My sister Lauren, the golden child. Lauren, the one who always got the new clothes, the new car, the endless praise. I was the responsible one, the one expected to figure things out on my own. And recently, Lauren had been planning her dream wedding. I remembered her casually mentioning that her venue alone cost nearly 50 grand. My mouth went dry. No, they wouldn't. They couldn't. But deep down, I already knew. I called my mom. She answered cheerfully like nothing was wrong. Hi, sweetheart. How's work? I didn't even say hello. Mom, did you and Dad sell my apartment? There was a pause. A long, guilty pause. Then she sighed. Jessica, listen, it was for a good cause. My blood boiled. A good cause? Are you kidding me? That was my home. My investment. You had no right. Her voice softened, like she was trying to talk a child out of a tantrum. Honey, Lauren's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. She deserves something beautiful. We thought you'd understand. You're always so independent, Jessica. You'll bounce back. Like I'd lost a shoe or a purse. Not my entire freaking apartment? I wanted to scream, but I just stood there, shaking, clutching the phone like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. My father came on the line then, his voice stern and cold. Jessica, this is family business. We expect you to support your sister. You'll get another place. Don't be selfish. Selfish. That word stabbed deeper than I expected. I'd spent my life doing everything on my own, never asking for help. And now, when I needed them to respect me, to value me, they sold my home and called me selfish. I didn't even remember ending the call. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on my bed, staring at the empty walls of a place that technically wasn't mine anymore. Tears burned my eyes, but underneath the hurt was something sharper. Anger. No, fury. I thought about Lauren walking down the aisle in her $10,000 dress, smiling for the cameras, basking in a wedding paid for with my sacrifice. I thought about my parents toasting champagne, acting like they'd done something noble. And I knew, I couldn't let it slide. This wasn't going to be one of those stories where I swallowed my pain and moved on. No. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, like my future was worth trading for a perfect day, then they were going to learn just how much I did matter. Because if Lauren got a wedding built on betrayal, then I was going to give her something she'd never forget. And my parents? They were about to realize that the daughter they underestimated had teeth. The revenge plan started forming in my head that very night. For 2 days after that phone call, I lived in a fog. I went to work because the office expected me to, answered emails, sat through meetings, nodded at colleagues' small talk. But my mind replayed the same scene on loop. My parents smiling at Lauren's engagement photos, champagne flutes clinking, while the walls that used to be my living room changed hands like a postcard. It felt unreal, like someone had photoshopped my life and then deleted the original file. Anger pushed me forward. If grief was the dull ache, rage was the fuel that made me move. I needed facts. I needed the who, when, where, how. Revenge without intel is just theater. I wanted to win the play, not improvise. So I started with the obvious place, paperwork. I took a day off and went to the county recorder's office downtown. The building smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, and everyone there wore the sort of polite indifference public servants perfect at. I waited my turn, signed a form, and asked for the deed history and the sale documents for 1460 North Harbor. The clerk handed me copies like they were handing out flyers. I sat on a metal bench and felt my fingers go numb while I scanned the pages. The sale had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. The buyer was listed, an LLC with a name that sounded like it belonged to a shipping company, not a person. Harborview Holdings, LLC. The transfer paperwork bore my name and my signature. My signature. I stared until the ink blurred. That signature? Forged, obviously. I'd never signed anything recently. I hadn't even received a notice, besides the one the bank mailed me after the deed had recorded. The power of attorney document was dated 5 years ago, signed back when I was backpacking through Spain and needed someone to pick up a tax refund. I'd given them temporary control, not permission to sell. There were signatures that hadn't been notarized properly. There were 2 different attorney names on the file, one I'd never heard of, the other a well-known local real estate lawyer who'd retired last year. It was sloppy, but it was also deliberate. Sloppy enough to get away with in a world that trusts signatures. I drove straight to the county courthouse to see a real estate attorney. I had a thin emergency fund I'd saved for a new car, not a legal battle. But there's something about betrayal that makes you willing to spend money you didn't plan to. I found a woman, Marisol Lane, who smelled like coffee and competence. Her office was all succulents and diplomas. When I explained the situation, my parents selling my condo without my consent, odd paperwork, LLC buyer, her eyebrows rose in a way that told me she'd heard worse, but rarely this personal. "You might have a case," she said bluntly. "There's potential for fraud, and even if your power of attorney was active, there should have been communication about a sale. That said, litigation's expensive and slow. If you want immediate leverage, there are other options." She leaned forward, voice dropping. "People hate public embarrassment. Owners of public reputations, like your parents might have in certain circles, will react if the wrong people hear the right things." Something cold and sharp clicked into place. Drama, but precise. Not petty, not illegal, just strategic. "Okay," I said. "Tell me everything." Marisol sketched out the obvious legal path. File to void the sale, argue undue influence, get an injunction. She gave me a price and a timetable. I could afford to stretch, but a protracted suit would eat my savings and drag my life into court for months. And honestly, I'd always preferred to avoid family court unless all other avenues were closed. Alternatively, she said, we can apply pressure. You've got a motive that's sympathetic. A daughter suddenly houseless because her parents sold her place. That's a narrative. We get the local press interested, maybe a consumer watchdog, some social media traction, and suddenly your parents will have to choose between defending their actions in public or fixing things privately. Public pressure. The thought felt delicious. I'd never been the social media type, but the world had shifted. An honest story could get traction fast. I could see it. Headlines, polite gasps. Lauren's wedding invitations suddenly feeling heavy as paper. But I didn't want to start a mob. I wanted control. I wanted the option of private settlement with the threat of noise in the background, like a violin that could climb to a crescendo if needed. Marisol nodded, like she'd read my thought. We can do both. I'll draft a letter demanding an immediate accounting of the sale and reserving all legal rights. We can threaten to file. Meanwhile, you gather documentation and witnesses. The more factual our story, the less it looks like an emotional rant, and the more it looks like a legal demand. Back at my apartment, what was left of it, I started cataloging. I pulled together bank statements, old emails, the power of attorney form, all the photographs of the place I'd taken over the years. I printed everything and made a folder labeled "Do Not Give Away." Then I made copies and filed them in a safe deposit box at a different bank. If they thought they could take what I'd built and pretend nothing happened, they hadn't met me. Next, I needed allies. Marisol suggested a journalist, someone who covered local politics and had a taste for human interest tales that tugged at readers. I thought of Katie Shue, the columnist who wrote a weekly piece called Neighbors and Narratives. Her byline flashed across my mind like a neon sign. Sharp, empathetic, not afraid to make people uncomfortable. I found her Twitter, slid into her DMs with a concise, factual message and, miracle of miracles, she replied asking to meet. We met at a small cafe the following afternoon. Katie was smaller in person, and she had a laugh like a chime. I laid out the facts without theatrics. No sobbing, no dramatic flourishes. Just the timeline. Power of attorney, sale documents, bank email, forged signature. She flipped through the photocopies, eyebrows knitting. This, she said at last, is rotten. If your parents sold your apartment to pay for a lavish wedding without telling you, that's news. People will care. Do you want an exclusive? I asked, feeling the adrenaline rise. She considered. Maybe, but I need more than a sad tale. I need proof that they used the funds explicitly for the wedding. Can you document Lauren's vendor contracts? The venue? Any deposits? There it was, the next step. I needed a paper trail showing where the money had gone. That meant finding Lauren's planner, her venue contract, invoices, things my parents and sister assumed I'd never see. It felt invasive, but then again, they'd already invaded my life. I could have confronted Lauren. The thought twisted my stomach. She'd always been practiced at misunderstanding. She'd smile, blink, and everything would be forgiven. No, this needed a different approach. I needed to get into their orbit without alarming them. That's when I thought of Emily, no relation, my college roommate who'd become a freelance photographer and had shot half of Lauren's Instagram. She'd done a styled shoot for Lauren last fall. If anyone had access to vendor names, dates, maybe even contracts, it would be Emily. I texted her, "Need a favor." "Coffee? Urgent." She replied almost immediately, always. "What's up?" Standing in my kitchen that night, the city lights winking beyond the window, I let myself draw the map. Legal pressure, press interest, evidence, allies, small moves, layered together like bricks. I didn't need to blow everything wide open on day one. I needed to fracture their certainty. Revenge, I decided, wasn't just about knocking them down. It was about showing them, in a way they couldn't ignore, that I mattered. That their choice had consequences, and if the wedding fell apart along the way, well, karma has a way of crashing the prettiest parties. The next week moved like a coiled spring, tense, purposeful, and humming with small, urgent tasks. I felt less like a person and more like an investigator in a true crime show, except the villain was my own family and the evidence was my life. First call was to Emily, my old college roommate and freelance photographer. She met me at a tiny cafe in Logan Square, all soft-focused sunlight and the smell of espresso. Emily hugged me like we hadn't been out of touch for years, then sat down with a concerned frown when she realized my smile didn't reach my eyes. "You look like someone kicked your dog," she said bluntly. And for the first time that week I laughed, short and raw. I told her everything, fast and stripped of theatrics. The bank letter, the forged signature, the sale, my parents' line about Lauren's wedding. Her expression shifted from shock to focused curiosity. I shot Lauren's engagement session last August, she said. We worked with a planner, Westlake Events, and a florist called Petal and Pine. I have emails, contracts maybe. She paid me a deposit, but I assumed Lauren had family support. Want me to dig up the receipts? Yes, I said. Please. Her laptop was a warm lifeline. Within an hour, she'd forwarded invoices, an email chain with Westlake confirming a $25,000 deposit for the venue, and a line-itemed contract from a couture dress boutique for a $9,600 gown. The numbers were piling up and the picture was ugly. I sat in my car staring at the screen until the city blurred. 25, 10, 15, venues, photographer deposits, catering estimates. I could feel the outline of the 100K wedding forming like a bad dream. Venue, catering, floral, videography, rentals, a string quartet, a signature cocktail bar. Each item a tooth and an elaborate smile my family had bought with my life savings. Next, I called Marisol. This is perfect, she said when I read her the line items. Not perfect for them, obviously, but perfect for us. This shows a direct flow of money for wedding services. We can trace the funds. Her tone was businesslike, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. She filed for an expedited accounting, legal speak for show me the money, and drafted a letter to my parents that was equal parts firm and civilized. It demanded a full explanation and the return of funds or proof of consent. We sent it overnight. Marisol suggested not going public yet. The legal machinery could bite fast, and I wanted leverage before anyone started weaponizing emotions against me. But leverage felt cold without a pulse. I wanted the story to land, not as some abstract legal argument, but as a narrative people would understand. A daughter left homeless so her sister could have a fantasy. Katie, the columnist, had asked for more proof before she'd even consider writing. Now I had it. I met Katie at her office, book-lined, a little messy, the kind of space where reporters live because their work is their oxygen. She read the contracts, tapped her pen like a metronome. This is concrete, she said. If we run it, we can frame it as a local consumer and family ethics issue. But be prepared. If we go public, your parents will either fold or double down. Some folks don't respond well to shame. I can handle it, I said. I wasn't sure if that was true, but the steel in my voice surprised me. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was the tiny, steady warmth of validation that came from someone else finally seeing me as more than a problem to be managed. Before Katie could commit to an article, I wanted one more piece of the puzzle, direct confirmation from the wedding vendor who'd received the money. That required a phone call that felt like a small theft of innocence. I pretended to be a distant cousin helping with day of logistics. It felt ridiculous and petty, but Emily insisted it was practical. Vendors are used to accommodating family members, she said. They'll drop names and dates without thinking. I rehearsed my lie in the car, polite, anxious, plausible. My stomach tightened as I dialed Westlake Events. A woman with a clipped Midwestern cadence answered and, after a few perfunctory questions, confirmed the $25,000 deposit and the final invoice for $42,000. Paid in full by Harborview Holdings, LLC, same mysterious buyer from the deed. There it was, a trace line. Harborview to Westlake. Westlake to the venue. My blood ran cold and weirdly hot with vindication. I recorded the call, with my phone face down on the seat like some kind of spy, and saved the transcript. It felt small and juvenile, but it was proof, plain and simple. Armed with invoices and vendor confirmations, I called my sister. Lauren picked up on the third ring, exuberant and bright as ever. "Jessie," she sang. "I'm at dress fittings, can't talk long. Everything is so perfect. Mom's going to have a meltdown of happiness." I folded my hands around the phone and breathed. "Lauren," I said, "did Mom and Dad pay for anything for your wedding?" There was a pause I'd learned to read. They helped a little. They're supporting us, yes, but you don't have to worry about that. She started, then stopped herself. "You don't have to worry?" I echoed. "Lauren, they sold my apartment." Silence, then a small, practiced gasp. What? No, Jess, that's ridiculous. Mom would never. She told me you were managing your place. Maybe it was some financial thing. Did you talk to them? Yeah, I said. They told me you deserved it and I'd bounce back. Is that how it feels to you? Like I was a budget item? There was a flinch in her voice, almost human. Sweetie, this is about our family's choice. I'm sorry if you feel hurt. She laughed nervously like a balloon of guilt being smoothed. I don't want drama. This is my day. I don't want to ruin your day, I said quietly. I want you to know exactly what it cost. She sniffed, then said, Jess, the wedding is happening. Please don't make this harder. She hung up. I stared at the blank screen and felt the last of the warmth drain out of my chest. That night, I laid everything out on my kitchen table like some twisted jigsaw. Power of attorney copy, the deed transfer vendor contracts, Westlake call transcript, Katie's email. It looked like a dossier, like the prelude to a trial. But more than that, it felt like a story, my story, being slowly reassembled. There was one final step before we moved, confronting my parents with the files and letting them squirm through a choice. Marisol advised caution. Give them a chance to fix it before we pulled the trigger on public exposure. So I drafted an email, calm and clinical, attaching copies of the documents and requesting a meeting within 72 hours. I didn't use drama. Drama was cheap. I used facts and a deadline. Sending that message felt like throwing a stone into still water. The ripples were small at first, one unread receipt, one buzzing notification. But I knew a storm could start from a stone if you aimed it right. As I hit send, I felt something settle in my chest. Fear was there, of course, the kind that comes when you get closer to a cliff and realize you can't turn back. But under the fear was a different sensation, clarity. For the first time since I'd torn open that urgent envelope, I had momentum. The truth was lined up and shining, and I was ready to let it do its work. I slept poorly that night, as if the house itself was holding its breath. But beneath the exhaustion was a steady, quiet satisfaction. I hadn't yet won, but I had the map. And maps are everything when you're trying to get home again. The email sat in their inbox for 24 hours before I got the reply. It came from my mother's account, written in that clipped, half-formal style she used when she wanted to sound respectable. Jessica, we received your message. We don't understand why you're turning this into a legal matter when it should be a family conversation. Your father and I made a decision for the benefit of everyone, and Lauren's future. We'll meet you at the house this Friday evening. Please keep this civil. The word landed like an insult. They wanted civil after they'd gutted my life for a party. Friday came, and with it, a sharp September chill. I drove to the house I'd grown up in. The tidy brick colonial with the red shutters and the garden that always looked clipped within an inch of its life. Walking up the path, I felt 10 years younger and infinitely angrier. I had my folder under my arm, the documents like weapons tucked in plain sight. The door opened before I could knock. My father stood there, tall, deliberate, his mouth already set in that line I knew from every childhood scolding. Jessica, he said evenly as if greeting a neighbor. Come in. The living room was too bright. Lamps in every corner, sunlight flooding through shears. Lauren was there, perched on the couch in a silk blouse that looked like it cost more than my rent. My mother sat in the armchair with her hands folded like a judge. The tableau felt staged, as if they'd rehearsed. I set the folder on the coffee table and didn't sit. I want to know why you sold my apartment. And I want to know how you thought you'd get away with it. Lauren rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out. Jess, please, it's not like you were living there. You've been renting it. You were barely attached. It was mine, I snapped. I paid the mortgage, the taxes, the repairs. I decorated it. I hosted friends there. It was the first thing I'd ever bought that was truly mine. And you, I pointed at my parents, my voice shaking, sold it to throw a 6-hour party with a champagne tower. It's not just a party, my mother said smoothly. It's a wedding, a once-in-a-lifetime event. You'll understand when it's your turn. Not if I have to steal from my own kid to afford it, I shot back. My father leaned forward, his voice low. Jessica, we did what we had to do. Lauren is starting her life. You're established. You'll recover. This is about family sacrifice. Families support each other. Sacrifice? I laughed bitterly. You didn't sacrifice. You sacrificed me. You took the roof over my head and turned it into a floral archway and a live band. That's not sacrifice. That's betrayal. Lauren's lips curved in that smug half-smile she'd worn since we were kids. You always make everything about you. This isn't about you, Jess. It's about love and family. You're ruining it. Something in me snapped then. I pulled the folder open and slid the contracts across the coffee table. Westlake Events, Petal and Pine, the dress invoice. You think I don't know where the money went? Harborview Holdings, that cute little LLC? I traced it. Straight into deposits for your planner, your venue, your dress. You didn't even bother to cover the trail. For the first time, I saw a flicker in my father's expression, a small twitch at his jaw. My mother's eyes darted quick as a bird. Lauren's smile faltered. Jessica, my mother said, her voice sharp now. This is private. You had no right. I had no right. I barked. You forged my signature. You abused a power of attorney that expired years ago. You sold my property without my consent. And you're telling me I had no right? I leaned closer, my voice steady, dangerous. You've got 72 hours to fix this. Return the funds. Cancel the vendors. Or I go public. The Tribune already has a copy of these invoices. Katie Shue is very interested in a human interest story about a family who steals from their daughter to fund their favorite child's wedding. The silence was electric. My parents froze, caught between disbelief and fury. Lauren actually gasped, hand to her chest like a soap opera star. You wouldn't, she whispered. Try me, I said. My father stood, his face flushed. You'd embarrass your own family? You'd drag us through the mud over some condo? Some condo? My voice cracked, then sharpened. It was my home. It was my security. And you decided your precious Lauren's fairy tale mattered more than my future. My mother tried to smooth it over. Her voice honeyed, but trembling. Jessica, honey, think of the long term. When you get married, we'll— Stop, I cut her off. I don't want promises. I want my apartment back. Or the cash. You've got 3 days. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and turned for the door. My hands were shaking, but my steps were steady. Behind me, I could hear Lauren whispering furiously, my mother hissing for calm, my father muttering about lawyers. Outside, the air was crisp, the evening just beginning to paint the sky in streaks of orange. My chest felt tight, but beneath the fear was something else. Power. For the first time, the shame wasn't mine. It was theirs. And they knew it. As I slid into my car, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was Katie. Let me know when you're ready. The story will run whenever you give the word. I stared at the screen and smiled. Cold, thin, but real. 3 days. Let's see how badly they wanted their perfect wedding now. The next 72 hours felt like living inside a pressure cooker. Once I'd set the countdown, everything sped up. Phones ringing, emails flying, small, frantic decisions being made behind closed doors. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster movie where the explosion is inevitable, and everyone around you is running in circles, trying to catch pieces of a future they'd already broken. My inbox filled with messages, some from friends offering support, some from strangers who'd seen Katie's tentative interest and asked if they could help. Katie herself was a steady presence, emailing drafts in legal-safe language, asking questions that made the truth feel sharper because someone else was holding it with me. Marisol sent updates like status reports. She'd filed a demand for accounting, put a hold notice on the transaction with the county recorder's office, and contacted Harborview Holdings' listed agent for clarification. Behind all that, the human mess played out in louder, more frantic ways. My parents were scrambling. The first attempt at damage control was predictably clumsy. A check for a partial refund arrived in the mail 2 days after my meeting at their house, wrapped in a note that read, "We are sorry. Please accept this as a gesture of our regret." The amount covered maybe a month of rent. It was a Band-Aid on a broken bone. I stared at that check and felt my stomach twist. They thought money could fix what they'd taken without consent. They hadn't learned anything, they called. My father's voice was brittle with anger and embarrassment. You've made this public, Jessica. You're driving people to gossip. Do you know what this will do to Lauren? He snapped. Think about your sister. Think about what you did to me, I said. Think about the fact that I no longer have the roof you sold. Think about me. My mother's messages alternated between pleading and explanation. We meant well. We didn't know it would go this far. You should be proud that your sister has such a beautiful wedding. The words were all there: reserve, rationalization, entitlement, but not a single apology that actually landed where it hurt. Meanwhile, Lauren oscillated between venom and vulnerability. At first she lashed out, snapping texts that read like reheated lines from old fights. You're trying to ruin my wedding. How could you? Then, in the quiet hours, she called, voice small. Jess, this is really spiraling. Please, can't we just… And I could hear the panic like a tremor under her words. When I didn't give her the scripted responses she wanted, she begged. Begging felt different than the smug entitlement I'd been used to. Back on my side, Marisol's tactics moved like a chess player. She served the demand for accounting, which forced my parents to reveal bank statements or face further legal escalation. She also put a freeze on any further transfers from Harborview Holdings while we pursued the paperwork. Legally, it was only the beginning, but it bought me time. Time felt precious. The vendors were a cascade of reactions. Westlake Events called their lawyer within hours. They'd always done their best to stay neutral. But when you see a potential scandal on the horizon, you start protecting your brand. Some contracts had clauses about force majeure and client confidentiality. Some vendors admitted they only handled deposits and didn't know the original source. Petal and Pine, sweet, frantic little florist, texted me directly, apologizing that they'd been part of this. We didn't know, the owner wrote. If there's anything we can do to help, let us know. Help. The word made my eyes sting a little. Help meant they were willing to unwind a portion of the celebration. Little concessions started to pile up. Some vendors issued partial refunds when presented with proof. One or two agreed to delay payments, and Westlake tentatively postponed the final venue hold. The wedding did not crumble overnight, but the scaffolding started to wobble. And then the craziest thing happened. My community reacted. A neighbor from my old condo complex, someone I'd waved to in the hallway, texted me after Katie posted a subtle, fact-based tweet about ethical family conduct and home ownership. If you need a temporary place, I have a guest room, she wrote. Small kindnesses like that were gasoline for the part of me that had felt hollow and alone. My parents, sensing their social circle tightening, tried to pivot. They issued statements to certain relatives, trying to frame the sale as a necessary family fund, a decision made for the good of the household. That only made things worse. The more they framed it as selfless, the uglier it sounded to anyone with eyes. Then, on the second evening of my deadline, my father did something unexpected. He showed up at my workplace. I wasn't expecting him. I was in a brainstorming session, hair in a messy bun, when my manager tapped my shoulder and said, Jessica, your dad's here. My chest did a weird flip. Seeing him in the courtyard, leaning against his car, looking smaller than I remembered, it made my anger feel pricklier, more human. We talked in his car like two strangers with a shared history. He tried to sound rational. We were planning for Lauren's future. You understand that, don't you? She's been planning this since she was little. I understand you chose the fairy tale over my future, I said. You chose to gamble my security, he swallowed. If you drop this, if you don't go to the press, we'll return the money. We'll take loans. We'll refinance. We'll do whatever it takes. Just don't destroy her day. His breath fogged in the cold air. It was an offer disguised as an ultimatum. Protection for silence. Reconciliation, but with a price. My willingness to erase the betrayal publicly. I stewed in the offer and felt cheapened by the bargain they assumed I would accept. You'll return the money? I asked. Yes, and when? In 10 days. We need time to arrange it. He sounded proud and defeated all at once. We're doing this for the family. 10 days. My legal counsel had told me that time often benefits the other side. Money can be shuffled. Stories can be rewritten. I had to decide whether I trusted a promise from people who had already built their lives on entitlement. That night, I sat in my kitchen and thought about leverage. Katie was ready to run the piece. Her editor wanted a go-ahead. My inbox hummed with offers, some kind, some cruel. The choice was mine. Take a delayed, conditional promise and walk away in private, or push forward and risk shattering the family forever in public. I thought about the look on my father's face when he'd said, "For the family." I thought about Lauren's laugh when she'd tried on her dress, about my own boxes of moving supplies tucked away in storage. I thought about the woman who'd offered me her guest room without hesitation, and the florist who'd said, "We didn't know." Revenge had started out as a roar in my chest, a need to make them feel small. But somewhere between the legal filings and the vendor emails, it had started to change shape. It was becoming less about spectacle and more about justice. Not vengeance for vengeance's sake, but a correction. I wanted my apartment back, yes, but I also wanted them to reckon with what they'd done. As I stared at the ceiling that night, my phone buzzed. It was Katie. "Are we running?" I typed back 3 words. "Not yet. Wait." On the other end of the line, somewhere in their tidy house with the silk blouse and the bridal planner, my parents slept fitfully. For now, the wedding still had a pulse. For now, the family still hoped to mend itself without public rupture. Tomorrow, I thought, I'd make the next move. I had a meeting with Marisol at 9. I had vendors to call. I had a city that had started to care. And I had a father who'd offered me a promise that tasted like a ploy. The countdown continued. The real decision was clear. Accept a delayed, conditional peace that might leave me hollow, or push forward and force a full reckoning. Either way, things would never be the same. The morning of the 3rd day dawned heavy with gray skies, as if the universe had dressed itself in anticipation of the storm. I woke up with my stomach twisted, my mind replaying every word my father had spoken in that car. 10 days. We'll refinance. We'll do whatever it takes. Promises that sounded like loose change rattling in a jar. I'd heard enough of them in my life to know they rarely cashed out. Marisol's office was my first stop. She looked sharp in a navy suit, hair tied back, her desk lined with neat stacks of case files. "So," she said, leaning back in her chair, "did they make their move?" "They offered to return the money," I admitted. "In 10 days. Loans, refinancing, whatever. But they want me to keep it quiet." Marisol's lips curved into a dry, knowing smile. Classic stall tactic. 10 days buys them time to shuffle assets, rewrite history, maybe even convince the vendors to close ranks. And if they don't follow through, you're left looking reactionary. They get silence. "You get nothing." I nodded, my pulse steady but fast. "That's what I thought." She slid a folder toward me. "Then here's our next play. We can file a fraud claim this week. Simultaneously, Katie runs the story. You'll be protected, your evidence is strong, and once this is public, they won't be able to manipulate the narrative behind your back." I stared at the folder. The thought of dragging my family into the public square made my throat dry. But then I remembered opening that urgent envelope weeks ago and realizing my home was gone. I remembered Lauren's smug smile, my mother's rationalizations, my father's scolding tone. They hadn't protected me in private. Why should I protect them in public? "Do it," I said. That afternoon, the dominoes began to fall. Katie's article went live online at 2:07 p.m. Headline bold against the screen. "Parents sell daughter's home to fund a $100K wedding. A cautionary tale of family, finance, and betrayal." The piece was surgical. Not sensational. Documents, timelines, direct quotes from me, a clear picture of where the money went. No melodrama, just fact. It was brutal in its clarity. Within an hour it spread. Local news stations picked it up. Twitter trended with hashtags I never imagined seeing beside my name. Strangers argued about entitlement, family loyalty, financial abuse. Some called me brave. Others called me cruel. But everyone was talking. By dinner time, my phone was melting. Voicemails from relatives ranged from furious, "How dare you humiliate your parents like this?" to quietly supportive, "Good for you, Jess. About time someone called them out." Katie texted updates like a war correspondent. The story had cracked the top page of the Tribune's online features. Other outlets were calling. Meanwhile, Marisol's filing hit the courthouse docket. A fraud claim? A request to void the deed transfer? A demand for injunctive relief? The law was slow, but the optics were immediate. Harborview Holdings suddenly wanted nothing to do with the mess. They contacted Marisol's office directly, offering to rescind the sale if liability could be avoided. My parents' precious shield, their corporate buyer, was folding. And then came Lauren. She showed up at my apartment that night, no silk blouse this time, just jeans, mascara smudged, eyes wide and red. She didn't knock gently. She banged until my neighbor peeked out to see what was going on. When I opened the door, she practically shoved past me. "How could you do this?" she demanded, voice hoarse. "Do you know what today was supposed to be?" "My final tasting with the caterer. The vendor called and said the booking is on hold. Everything is unraveling. People are canceling. My friends are messaging me nonstop. 'You've humiliated me!' Her words cracked against my walls, but they didn't land. I crossed my arms. 'You humiliated yourself when you let them steal from me. You knew where that money came from, Lauren. Don't pretend you didn't.' She flinched, then pressed her hands to her face. 'I didn't think it would matter this much. I thought you'd move on. Like you always do. Move on.' The phrase lit something raw in me. 'You took my apartment, my security, and you expected me to shrug it off? You expected me to smile through your wedding like it wasn't built on the ashes of my life?' Her tears spilled then, messy and real. 'It's ruined. Everything's ruined.' I wanted to feel pity. I wanted to feel something soft. But all I felt was cold resolve. 'No, Lauren. It's not ruined. It's honest. That's different. Maybe now you'll build something that isn't stolen.' She left without another word, her sobs echoing in the stairwell. The days that followed were a blur of fallout. My parents' phones rang off the hook with reporters. Their friends stopped showing up to book club and golf outings. Lauren's vendors pulled contracts one by one, afraid of being dragged into the mess. The wedding didn't just wobble, it collapsed, like a glass house hit by a stone. And my apartment? 2 weeks later, the sale was voided. Harborview wanted out, the court agreed to freeze the deed, and with Marisol's relentless push, the title slid back into my name. Walking into that space again, knowing it was mine, felt like breathing after drowning. The revenge wasn't loud fireworks. It was quieter, heavier, the sight of people who thought they'd won realizing the cost of their choices. My parents stopped calling. Lauren blocked me on Instagram. The family fractured, but for once, I wasn't the one carrying the weight of silence. On a crisp October night, I sat on my reclaimed couch, sipping tea, watching the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Katie. "Any regrets?" I typed back slowly. "None." They thought I'd bounce back. I bounced forward. And for the first time since the betrayal began, I smiled. Not out of triumph, but out of peace. Revenge had given me justice. Justice had given me freedom, and freedom felt like home. In the end, I didn't just get my apartment back, I got something bigger. I got my voice back. My parents thought they could silence me with guilt, and my sister thought I'd roll over like I always had. But instead, I showed them what happens when you push someone too far. The wedding? Canceled. The vendors? Gone. The picture-perfect fairy tale they wanted to build on my sacrifice? Shattered. And me? I'm standing stronger than ever, with my home, my freedom, and a story that everyone will remember. Sometimes revenge isn't about screaming the loudest. It's about showing the people who betrayed you that you don't need them anymore. That the life they tried to steal from you is exactly the life you're going to thrive in. And as I locked the door to my apartment that night, I whispered to myself, this isn't just payback. This is the beginning of something better.